Yes, so welcome to the session on electrical vehicles for the next hour. I hope you have enjoyed the MARUF conference so far, and today we will be reflecting on whether the enthusiasm on electric vehicles is justified or not. So our aim is not to find one conclusion for the discussion, but more to explore all sides of whether electric vehicles are a hype or not. So I'm Susa, and I come from the city of Helsinki, Finland, and also Aalto University, Finland. And today with me here are discussing Görkem and Haluk, and they will present themselves in more detail once it comes up to their presentations. But let's go straight into the business and start with the presentation of Görkem and the commentary speech by Haluk here, and then we will open the discussion for questions afterwards.
Thank you. Okay. And this one works too. Okay, good afternoon everyone. My name is Görkem Üçtuğ. I'm an associate professor of chemical engineering from Izmir University of Economics, Turkey, and I'm also the founding partner and head of the board of directors of Janset Incorporated, which is an environmental consultancy firm. I work on topics like sustainability, life cycle assessment, carbon footprint calculations, process design and optimization, energy systems for buildings, renewable energy technologies. I have provided consultancy in terms of carbon footprinting, life cycle assessment, corporate sustainability to major companies such as Sokar, Tatgıda, Eurogıda, Kredi Kayıt Bürosu, Zorlu Enerji, Profilo, etc. So, today, I am very privileged to be here at such a prestigious event in front of such a distinguished audience. So I would like to thank to all members of the audience for being here, listening to us, and I hope we will not disappoint you. And in line with the title of our session, I will be speaking about electric vehicles. Are they actually sustainable or not? So the main focus of our discussion will be electric vehicles only, which are vehicles that run with an electric battery. So hybrid vehicles that have both an internal combustion engine and an electric battery will not be the concern of our discussion today. So the popularity of electric vehicles has been increasing dramatically. In the first half of 2023, the number of electric vehicles in Turkey has increased by a staggering 90% almost, which is a very huge number. And when we look at the global situation, it's not much different. When you look at this trend, you see that in every year, on average, the number of electric vehicles sold increases by 50%. And when we look at the situation from an urban perspective, we see that several cities in the world continuously add more and more electric buses to their public transportation fleet. The best example in this case appears to be Shenzhen from China, where more than 16,000 buses all run with electric motors. We also see Oslo from Norway, who also has a 100% electric vehicle fleet, but the numbers is much more modest compared to Shenzhen. And when we look at Istanbul, we see that we are still at the very early stages of electrification, but hopefully in the years to come, this statistic will significantly improve. So now that we have spoken about the Shenzhen case, which could be considered as a best practice, I would like to talk a little bit more. So they completed the transition to fully electric fleet in 2021, and this significantly improved the air quality in Shenzhen. And for those of you who may know a bit about the environmental problems with cities, China has a very significant air quality problem in its metropolitan, so this is a very big step towards reducing the impacts of that problem. Now that we have spoken about the advantages of electric vehicles, one of which is improved air quality, let's go into the issue in more detail. So electric vehicles have generally lower operating costs, assuming that the cost of electricity per mile is lower than the cost of electricity, cost of fuel per mile. They reduce the dependence on oil, which is especially critical for countries like Turkey, where the local fossil fuel reserves are limited. They have lower carbon footprint to internal combustion engine vehicles, or at least that is what is suggested, because in the second half of my presentation I will be going into that topic in detail, and they offer better thermal and mechanical stability. But like any other technology, electric vehicles also have certain disadvantages. First of all, if the charging infrastructure is not adequate, then traveling long distances especially becomes quite annoying. And recharging takes quite longer compared to refueling your car. On average, the driving range of an electric vehicle is significantly lower than the driving range of internal combustion engine vehicles of the same class. Now, I know that there are some very nice models out there that have very high driving range, but I'm speaking about the average values of the industry. And although there are no direct emissions during the operation of an electric vehicle, there are indirect emissions in the background which cannot be overlooked. And again, I'm going to discuss this later in more detail. Now I would like to take a slight detour and talk a little bit about sustainability, which is one of the most important topics of our days. All major companies have sustainability departments, so they are trying to make their processes more sustainable. They are trying to show the world that they are more sustainable. But how much do we actually know about sustainability? So sustainability can be defined as the ability to meet today's needs without compromising the future generations' abilities to do so. And sustainability should be studied from 3 different points of view, or it has 3 pillars, which are the biosphere or the environment, the society, and the economy. Now at this point, I would like to ask a small question to the members of the audience. I have just said that there are 3 pillars of sustainability: environment, society, and the economy. But when you hear the word sustainability, which of those 3 comes to your mind the first? Any opinions? Any opinions from you? Is it the environment? Is it the economy? Is it the society? Well, some of you say economy, some of you say environment. Interesting. But that's the beauty of this question, because it has no correct answer, basically. It has a popular answer. In my own experience, when you ask people about what they think in terms of becoming more sustainable, 9 out of 10, I get the answer. The answer that I get is to reduce their environmental impact. So usually sustainability resonates with environment. And this particular slide is the proof of that. Now I'm sure you cannot read what is on that slide, but all you need to pay attention is actually the colors. So in this slide, on the top half, we have the top 5 global impacts from 2007 until 2020 in terms of their likelihood to occur. And in the bottom half, we have the top 5 global impacts, global risks in terms of their impact in case they occur. And the green ones are the environmental risks. And as you can see, by 2020, which is almost today, 8 out of 10 of those impacts are environmental impacts, environmental risks. I also have the 2023 version of this slide, but it does not run from the past until today. It only has 1 line, so I thought this one would look better. In the 2022 version, 7 out of 10 global risks are environmental. So many people think that environment is the biggest problem of modern world. So in that regard, I believe we should look at the environmental impacts of electric vehicles in more detail. Because although they are generally considered to be environmentally friendly, they do have certain environmental impacts which mostly arise from material consumption during the manufacturing of the vehicle itself, and more importantly, the battery. And unfortunately, those batteries are generally not manufactured to be recycled easily, and therefore the environmental impact increases further. And to get the answer to the question if electric vehicles are environmentally more friendly than internal combustion engine vehicles or not, the only way is to look at this situation through a life cycle perspective, which means considering the impacts associated with all stages of those two technologies. What are those stages? As you can see, resource gathering, processing and manufacturing, distribution, storage, use, and then end-of-life treatment. Only then we can actually say, okay, this technology is environmentally more friendly than this one. Without a life cycle approach, the answer we will get will be incomplete. And in that regard, I would like to share a study of mine with you. Unfortunately, it was published in Turkish, so I will just share the highlights here, titled, as you can see, Comparative Environmental Life Cycle Assessment of Electric Vehicles and Internal Combustion Engine Vehicles Manufactured in Turkey. So in this study, I was inspired by studies that were conducted elsewhere in the world. There are several, but I found three particular ones which were very similar to mine in terms of their scope. One in Brazil, one in Lithuania, and one in Canada. And especially the Canadian study motivated me because they suggested that electric vehicles can actually be environmentally more impactful compared to internal combustion engine vehicles, which was a very surprising and controversial proposal. So I wanted to see for myself what is the condition in Turkey. And I performed a life cycle assessment study by considering raw material supply, production and assembly, transportation, usage, and disposal of both technologies from cradle to grave. And I considered these 6 environmental impacts. Now, I am sure you are all familiar with the term carbon footprint. It has become a very generic term nowadays. While I am not going to underestimate the importance of carbon footprint, I have to say carbon footprint is not the only environmental impact. There are other environmental impacts to consider as well. And I included some of them in my analysis. I don't think this session is the right place to go into further detail regarding the technical meanings of those impacts, but if any one of you is interested, I will be very happy to take the discussion after the session. So, here are the results. Again, the numbers may not be easy to read, but I think they are okay. Now, when I was preparing this figure on my computer, I was so biased that before I prepared the figure, I assigned the white label to electric vehicles and the black label to internal combustion engine vehicles, assuming that electric vehicles would have significantly lower environmental impact. So they would be white, they would be clean. But the reality is not what I expected. As you can see in the figure, 4 out of 6 impacts turn out to be higher in the case of electric vehicles, only in carbon footprint and photochemical oxidant creation potential, which is a fancy name for actually air pollution. So only in carbon footprint and air pollution, electric vehicles are actually better than internal combustion engine vehicles. But for all the other impacts, internal combustion engine vehicles are more environmentally friendly. That was a very interesting finding, but that is science. These are not subjective results. Anyone who uses data from the industry with the same assumptions would end up with the same results. So, what is the meaning of this study? When you assign equal weights to all these impacts, overall, electric vehicles have 4% higher environmental impact than internal combustion engine vehicles. Now, at this point, one might suggest that who cares about those other impacts you mentioned? World's biggest problem is climate change, so we need to consider carbon footprint. We have to prioritize carbon footprint, and also improving the air quality or reducing air pollution in urban locations is also very critical. Therefore, the benefits that we get by using electric vehicles in terms of carbon footprint and in terms of air pollution would outweigh the harm that we are increasing in terms of other impacts. So it is a sort of a trade-off. I would definitely not argue with that point of view. That is a very respectable opinion. But science suggests that if those impacts are considered to be equal one another in terms of importance, electric vehicles are dirtier than internal combustion engine vehicles. But if we stick to that opinion, and we think that we should invest on electric vehicles to reduce our carbon footprint, to improve air quality, to reduce our oil dependence, which personally I totally agree with. Then, if Turkey reaches its targets for the proliferation of electric vehicles, by 2030, the nationwide greenhouse gas emissions of the country is expected to be decreased by approximately 1.6%, which may not sound very high, but it is actually a very big number. So that is all I would like to say initially. I believe that we will have a very fruitful discussion in the following minutes with my esteemed co-panelists and with the distinguished members of the audience. So I'm looking forward to discussion. I will be happy to answer your questions. And here is my contact information. It's been my pleasure being here speaking in front of you, and I wish all of you a fruitful conference. Thank you.
Thank you. Let's save the possible questions for later and hear some more views on whether electric vehicles are hype or not from Haluk.
Thank you. I hope my speech will be as insightful. I don't have a presentation, sorry for that, but my name is Haluk. I am the CEO of Fark Labs. In Fark Labs, we work with innovation and entrepreneurship world. So we invest in startups, help them grow, we incubate them, accelerate them, and we are a part of a larger group which works mainly for the auto industry, and I spent 20 years in the auto industry. So I'm quite familiar with the industry, how it is motivated. I answered your question as economy because in the business world, majority works with economy. So if anything is not economically feasible, then people don't use it. And I was actually in a confidential event about 15 years ago, and there we were discussing why cars don't use these touch screens, but they actually use buttons instead. Because we had the cell phones with the touch screens, and cars are advanced products, and the answer was quite interesting. Because the buyers are not ready to do so. People feel more safer when they have the buttons, and touch screens are not perceived as that safe. And the ones who is going to pay for the cars do not prefer touch screens, but when they do so, they're already there. So I believe, and I actually attend to a lot of events with electrification, hydrogen, and our major focus is mobility, so I'm exposed to this discussion quite often, and I agree that the outcome Görkem showed is in line with a lot of different discussions. Some countries say, okay, it's rather head-to-head, or the starting point is, in majority of the studies, electric vehicles consume more carbon dioxide at the starting point due to its manufacturing. But over time, it's more feasible. Some say no. In my view, we compare two different fruits. So it's not an apple-to-apple comparison, because internal combustion engines are in the market for over 120 years. The other one is, let's say, 20 years. So the improvement opportunities for the electric vehicles has not been as much as the internal combustion engines, and most probably, they already have more advanced solutions which are yet not in the market, because they need to monetize the investments they have done already. So we all know different technologies being studied in the batteries. So lithium-ion is the biggest source today, and it is also one of the major high CO2 reason for electric vehicles, but there are different technologies being studied, sodium-ion or aluminum-ion, solid state, so different batteries will come over time, and it will help electric vehicles to be more environmental friendly over time. But I fully agree with the misconception that electric vehicles are net zero. They are not, totally not. From the starting point, they're not. And we move carbon dioxide from the, let's say, cities, if we assume that they're used in cities, to different areas. It may have some positive effects for the things that we don't measure properly, because we also say the auto industry is quite good for all countries because of the jobs it creates. For every OEM worker, there are 7 jobs created in the country, the suppliers and the sub-suppliers, and then they go to the supermarkets, etc., etc. So it's a business which creates with a very big impact, but it also has a CO2 effect. And when you move internal combustion engine to electric vehicle, it also creates some higher impact for CO2 reduction. You mentioned maintenance. When you have less maintenance, actually there are lots of carbon dioxide saved. I don't know if your calculations include the afterlife maintenance-related CO2 creation or saving, but they may. There are a lot of very hardly measurable side effects of hydrogen creation. So eventually, I believe that EVs are not a hype, so if it was the question, and they will be more and more environmental friendly. But today, it's a discussion, yes, and I am on the side of the ones who says EVs are not net zero. But still, it is something to hug and work on, and it will come over time. It will never be net zero, by the way, but it will be closer and closer.
Thank you. So before going to your questions, let's heat up the discussion a bit. So Görkem, based on your research findings, can we actually propose that EVs are unsustainable?
Thank you for the question. Not at all. Well, the title of this session is Hype or Not. So maybe the audience expects on one side of the moderator there is this red devil that says no, and then there's the white angel on the other side. But actually we say similar things with Haluk Bey. Basically, there are problems that concern electric vehicles, but I would say they are not unsustainable. I mean, there are first of all, in my study I shared data from Lithuania, Brazil, Canada, and then my own study from Turkey. And 2 of those studies suggest electric vehicles have more impact than internal combustion engine vehicles, and 2 of them suggest just the opposite. Why do you think is that? Simply because of the electricity grid that provides the electricity for the electric vehicles to run throughout their lifetime, 25 years. That is what I assumed. So in Turkey, we still rely on fossil fuels extensively, up to 60%. To provide our grid electricity. So when you run an electric vehicle with electricity that is generated by relying on fossil fuels with a share of 60%, then that electric vehicle throughout its lifetime will have quite high impact. Take the same electric vehicle, drive it in France, drive it in Denmark, then probably it's going to have half of the environmental impact it has here in Turkey. So that is a factor that we have to consider. And in time, I am sure, as Haluk Bey suggested himself, the impact of our grid electricity will reduce. As a result, the indirect impact of driving electric vehicles that consume that grid electricity will reduce. We will have a nuclear power plant, maybe even more than one, in the near future. That will significantly reduce the environmental impacts of our electricity grid. Contrary to the popular belief, nuclear is a very clean source of energy. And we are discovering natural gas reserves, and as a result, maybe we will rely less on coal. And we are investing on renewables. Day by day, the renewable share in the electricity grid is increasing. So obviously, I'm speaking about Turkey in general, but what I say applies more or less all countries in the world. I mean, there's a shift from fossil fuels towards renewables, and it will eventually reduce the impacts associated with electric vehicles, and I definitely believe that they are not unsustainable. I just want to show you that
they are not as clean as people think they are for the time being.
Thank you. You mentioned the very important field of energy here. So, Haluk, what do you think? How are the EVs actually transforming the mobility industry, and does it actually rely on also an energy transition simultaneously?
The energy part of the EVs is another big discussion nowadays because no country has enough energy to cover the whole needs if all cars become electric. So neither the grids are ready nor we have enough electricity to cover everything we have already today plus the electric cars. And I was recently into another event where they made some simulation for a Christmas Eve event where people in Europe or in many countries travel during Christmas time, so they need to charge their cars before the holiday. So a sudden demand on the cars to be charged at the same time, how much electricity will be required, and then in 2 days' time, majority of them will be empty, and then they will need it again, and it's winter time, so the sun is not much there, etc., etc. So there are lots of issues with the electric energy need, but again, there will not be only one resource. So I again fully agree about the nuclear energy. It is going to be there for a long time, and majority of the scientists agree that it's clean actually. And hydrogen will get in. So when we have, the energy storage systems, of course they will come in, like the large batteries. But hydrogen and hydrogen-related products will get into the deal, and probably we will have more and more clean energy. And I think last year was the first time that clean energy investments were more than the traditional energy investments. So the world has managed to make more investments on clean energy starting from last year, but we have the cumulated capacity, so it will take a lot of years to reach up. But here, again on the sustainability, I think, I don't know if it gets into sustainability, it's not my expertise, but I also believe that the energy transition here has a very positive side, which is the democratizing the energy. So when we run an internal combustion engine, at least in Turkey, we cannot dig our backyard and create our own oil. But we can create our own energy if we have the solar panels. So the energy dependency, and it became a huge issue due to the war, it's a major discussion everywhere in the world. And when you have electricity, then you have the possibility to produce it in your own country. And when you have energy production in your own country, you're more free. And it's not only for Turkey or not for Europe, it's for the whole world. And when you don't have this dependency on a few countries, maybe the world is a bit more peaceful country. And it also refers not only for the energy production, but also for the OEMs. So we all know the major auto manufacturers in the world, but producing an electric car is also much easier. So we have more and more electric vehicle OEMs in the world. They are much, let's say, faster, simpler organizations, simpler cars, and over the time, I think it will create more competition between the auto world, which will help prices go down. And again, talking about the carbon dioxide, the lifetime of a project, of a new vehicle is between 3 to 5 years, depending on the OEM, but it's not the case in the new OEMs. So imagine a large organization working on one project for 5 years or 2 years. So this saving of 3 years will also have a positive impact on the carbon emission. And I don't know if it was calculated in any study, but there are a lot of positive things coming with the EVs because it's a new world. and the new world is always trying to be better than the older one. But especially about the energy transition, I think it is creating a huge impact on the way the world turns today. It's different, and I think it's for the better.
Thank you. So from here, I'm starting to read that it might not be only a hype, but might also have a longer-term potential. So let's move on to the urban sphere, which I think is also the context of MARUF. And before going to the questions from the audience, I would like to get insights from both of our discussions on are the EVs actually somehow changing the urban life? We know the questions about affordability, whether they are actually a solution for all of the mobility, and we also know that all of the cities have a very limited space available, and we know that many cities are growing simultaneously. So are those also a solution for urban life, and if so, how are they actually transforming our urban life in the future?
Thank you very much for the question. Now, it's evident that the urban life is being transformed by the introduction of electric vehicles into our society. I just shared a statistic earlier in my presentation that in Turkey, in the first half of this year, the number of electric vehicles on the road has increased by almost 90%, which means there is a huge demand for this product. Actually, when I was talking about sustainability, I spoke about the environmental, the social, the economic foundations of sustainability, and then Haluk Bey gave the perfect example. I could have spoken for 30 minutes and could not have made my point clearer as he did. He said, you can generate your own electricity in your backyard, but you cannot basically drill your own oil well in your backyard and produce gasoline or diesel. So actually this gives the chance to individuals to reduce their fuel cost or transportation cost, let's call it. So that is the economic benefit. And from my own perspective, since I work on the environmental side of these issues mostly, I have to say there is also a huge potential to improve air quality. I mean, photochemical smoke, which is the technical name for air pollution, is a very big issue. It especially is more critical during winter time because not only all the schools are open, so everyone is working, the traffic is at its busiest, and also we are using central heating in all buildings, and all those boilers use natural gas, some of them coal, and all these pollutants are released into the atmosphere, and electric vehicles, as we have earlier seen in the case of Shenzhen, China, has this huge potential to improve the public health in metropolitans such as Istanbul. So in those two regards, I really believe electric vehicles have the potential to lead to a very significant transformation in urban life. Thank you.
Thank you. How about Haluk?
In urban life, we were mostly talking about cars, but in urban life we have a variety of vehicles. So we have the it turned it to be a kind of hype, but this kick scooters. But it became also a discussion that maybe electric bikes are worse off because in the past people were just pedaling and now they use electricity, which is more polluting. But then when you look at all the electric, when you look at all the new vehicles born to be electric, you have a multiple variety of solutions to be used in urban life. So in the other room there, we even have some startups which develop very simple cars. So they are not considered as cars. They are more a simpler level of mobility device, we can call. And they cannot be as fast. They don't need those safety regulations as a normal car, but they can transport 2% from point A to B, and in city life, the destinations we take every day is rather short. So then you start creating your own different vehicles which can be very environmental friendly, and they are actually replacing cars. So this is very positive. And then in city life, of course, we also talked about buses. There are discussions that the electric vehicles will remain mostly in the car segment, and larger vehicles will be more hydrogen. It is a big discussion. Probably it will end up somewhere that not one solution wins it all. It will be a kind of mix, because we see more solutions where buses are electric, but then they are combined with hydrogen fuel cells as a range extender. And range may be okay, but also in cities like Istanbul, when you go uphill, then you need a more push from the engine, and it may not be fitting well with the EV engine. So more and more hybrid vehicles are being produced. But eventually, I believe that, and it's not my own belief, there will be 100 net zero cities by 2030, and Istanbul claims to be one of those. So to do those, of course, we need to be totally net zero, at least in the operating side of the vehicles. And that means all internal combustion engines must be out. But here we also have another discussion where internal combustion engines burning hydrogen, are they net zero or not? So they are accepted as net zero today, although they have a toxic outcome. The regulators accepted them as net zero. So now buses actually can burn hydrogen, and there will be a NOx outcome, but there is no CO2. So if we are going to accept them as net zero, then internal combustion engines, especially in trucks and buses, in large engine vehicles, will remain. But what they will burn will not be oil and gas, which we know today, but they will be burning hydrogen or some other organic fuels. Because as I mentioned at the beginning, it's all about economy. So people have spent billions to develop this engine technology, and they do their best to get more out of it. So instead of burning LPG, you can burn hydrogen, which is not equivalent. Hydrogen is much more complex, and it has its difficulties, but it's there. So, and I know many companies are working on those. So we may not end up in electric vehicles only in city life while reaching the target net zero.
Thank you. So let me open the discussion for the rest of our participants. So if any of you have any questions or comments for our discussions. So I think we have a microphone there. Yes. Oh, it's actually here.
Alternatif enerji politikalarını desteklemekle beraber elektrikli araçlar konusunda mesafeliyim, şahsi görüşüm. Bizim ülkemiz için gerçekten böyle bir yatırım gerekli mi, böyle bir teknoloji gerekli mi? Bunu sorgulamak lazım. Bizim elektrikli araçlardan
So instead of rather than the investments on EVs, our main problem is about planning. Infrastructure. To what extent are we really going to use the EVs in traffic? How many hours will they last? If we had planned all these things already, maybe we could have solved the problem through rail systems and by improving the public transportation systems. I think in the long run, the EVs, batteries, will pose problems in terms of their implications on the environment when we try to dispose them. One last thing, I think, as a popular culture, this is still a topic that is of interest, but I believe in the future they won't be useful or beneficial to us. Thank you.
are we supposed to? I thought it was just a comment, so should we?
Yes, you can react
Okay.
shortly. Yes.
So that is a very respectable opinion. There are parts that I agree and parts that I disagree with. So I agree with you on the fact that the planning should be prioritized, and public transportation, obviously, by using railway technologies, should be prioritized because they would provide a better quality of service and they have the potential to reduce oil dependence. But on the other hand, we do have this problem. You mentioned that in the long run there will be a problem of the waste disposal regarding electric batteries. Yes, with the current trend, that is going to be a problem. But the assumption is that at some point there will be some sort of, again, as you yourself suggested very wisely, there will be a central planning which mandates that all those batteries are properly recycled. It should have already started, and not only for electric vehicle batteries, I mean for our mobile electronics as well. How many of us keep those old phones that we don't use in our drawers? I'm sure at least half of the people in this session right now have one mobile phone in their home that they have not touched for 5 years, but it's still in one of their drawers in case they may need it in the future. But if all those electronic items that have that precious lithium-ion and many other precious metals in them could be recycled properly, then we would not have that problem this gentleman very rightfully suggested would happen in the future. So that is the part I agree with, and then I disagree with, and I'm sure my co-panelists will have something to add on that.
I have 2 comments. So on the planning side, maybe EVs will help because this is a need. I mean, you cannot just put gas and run the bus for a long time. When you have a limited resource, it's a need that you need to plan. So for the planning needs, I think electric vehicles actually will help us to be a more organized land. Then now I remembered that I need to make 3 comments. For the technology side, I think it's a national security matter. You will see that electric vehicles is not something irreversible. It is irreversible. It will be here. And like the chips, electronic chips, or like the gas, if you don't have your own EV technologies, if you don't have your battery resource, then the gas will be replaced by batteries. So you need every country in Europe, every country in the world who has insight, who is thinking about those, they're trying to develop their own EV technologies. And last but not least, for the third subject was, for the recycling. For recycling, as soon as Turkey has enough battery capacity, there will be recycling companies. There are many in the world today, and it's an improving technology. We check many of those. When the supply is enough, they can immediately come and almost, some claim 90%, some claim 97%, some claim more, but they can actually take back all the lithium from the battery. And there is the regulation of battery passport already. So now, at least in Europe, all battery users, let's say the cars or the cell phones, whoever, will need to follow where this battery goes. So there will be a battery passport. Either it's recycled or second life or waiting somewhere else. We need to follow the batteries. It's a regulation, new regulation. So they will not be wasted as in the old days. Regulatories think about those and they put the laws. So.
Thank you. Any other? There is one comment here.
Merhaba. Ben de elektrikli araçlara, özellikle elektrikli otomobillere mesafeli yaklaşan ve hatta biraz da balon olduğunu düşünüyorum. Bu konu hakkında özellikle kentsel konforun, yani biz sunum başında sürdürebilir.
Sustainability and environmental sustainability. There are so many dimensions that we need to think about, and urban comfort, urban accessibility are also important. And I don't think there's a big difference between conventional vehicles and EVs, because EVs will also create congestion in the cities, and on top of that, because of battery-related problems. And especially, there are a lot of SUV EVs, but what our cities need is not more SUVs. I think they need smaller cars. They need more pedestrianized streets and avenues. So in terms of urban mobility, I do not really think that EVs are really such a good idea. And in terms of intercity travel, their ranges are not so sufficient. So I'm not really terribly impressed. And also there's the security side. These EVs are very strong vehicles. They have more horsepower, and also it was mentioned during the presentation. Are the users really ready, for touch screens, for instance, or such high intensity vehicles? I mean, and how about our legislation? Are we up for it? Are you ready for it? For such high horsepower vehicles? And I fear that once we have more EVs, we will see electric cables all around, people trying to charge their cars everywhere. And I'm a cyclist, and when I bike, when there's an EV that passes me by, they're silent. You don't know whether they're coming, you don't know whether it's a driverless car or not. And with scooters, electric scooters, there's a geo-mapping system. Are we going to have the same thing for EVs? Is there going to be a speed limit to EVs? Will there be limitations? I mean, all of these are really important. I think these are important considerations. So if there is some limitations, then will they be sold? Will people buy them? Is another question. So yes, EVs are quite popular right now, and maybe it's a marketing gimmick, and people keep their conventional vehicles for long distance journeys, and they get an EV for the city, and that's my fear. I mean, we don't want multiple vehicle ownership. We're trying to reduce, utilization of vehicles, automobiles in the city, and EVs might mean more cars on the street. Thank you.
Let's pause here for a moment, because this issue of urban space and the limited urban space available is very important. Also from the perspective of EVs, because they are taking up as much space as the current vehicle fleet that we have here. So very short comments from both of the discussions. How to deal with the limited space in cities when talking about the EVs? Do we have space available for those or not?
Well, actually, in that regard, this gentleman brought up a very correct argument, because many people are probably buying a second car right now to drive within the city, but they keep their internal combustion vehicles for long distance travels, especially in countries like Turkey. I mean, Turkey is a quite big country, maybe not as big as United States or Canada or whatsoever, but it's bigger than any European country, and as a result, the distance between cities is very high, and many people may fear that the electric vehicles they have will be insufficient for intercity travel, and they will rely on their internal combustion vehicles, and this will multiply the number of vehicles in the traffic, and also for parking, and that will create a problem. I mean, I come from Izmir, and Izmir, this would be a nightmare, because, I mean, whatever idea you have about the problems of Istanbul, for instance, I suppose we have delegates from all Marmara region today in this hall, but whatever idea you have about Istanbul, Izmir has much worse. I mean, public space is a nightmare in Izmir. I mean, no buildings have, few buildings have their parking spaces. Everyone parks on the street. A four-lane road only has 2 lanes accessible. The other 2 lanes are occupied by vehicles all day long. So that is a problem I totally sympathize with. But as far as other comments are concerned, I believe they are a bit short-sighted. They are problems of only today, and in the near future, they will all go away. I mean, technology will develop. Look at where we are right now in terms of mileage, and look at where we were like 5-10 years ago. And 10 years from today, I am pretty sure electric vehicles will have more or less the same driving range as internal combustion engine vehicles. So these are only the problems for today, but in the short run, yes, there is a significant problem regarding space availability in urban locations. I agree.
Haluk, how to deal with the limited space?
I believe that maybe we are putting too much pressure on the EVs because they cannot solve everything. Obviously, in Istanbul and all big cities, there must be less cars. I fully agree. But is it the EVs to solve it? Are they going to negatively affect it? Maybe, but let me also tell you a real case. You know, when we probably all know Renault Logan, right? So when that vehicle came, Renault's target was to sell those vehicles in third world countries. So not even Turkey. So it's a very cheap car, very cost efficient, and it was, I think, less than 10,000 euros. And the target was to sell it to low income countries. But it ended up that a lot of those cars were sold in Paris. Because in Paris, and Renault never thought to have it, because in Paris you have very limited parking zone. And if you go there, you will see some cars pushing the other one to create enough space to get in. So it's very common. And instead of hurting or scratching their nice car, people bought second cars as Logans just to drive it in the city because it was also very oil efficient. And if anyone scratches that, no problem. So any solution, I mean, for those cases, you're right, totally, but it is very, I think it's not fair to blame EVs for those. EVs are a good solution to create less CO2 in the city. But of course, it may have side effects, etc., etc. But I mean, for the second car, I'm not pretty sure if it will be only effect. And for the charging stations, Turkey is #1 in Turkey for charging stations per electric cars because we have very little electric cars. We have a lot of stations, but not much cars. The target, the estimation for Turkey is in 2030, we will have 1 million electric cars. And even with that number, we will still have a good charging station network. If you speak to any company running charging stations, you will see that they are all increasing the length of their feasibility studies. It started somewhere between 8 to 10, and then it's around 15 today, because they don't have enough customers. So for charging stations, at least in the upcoming 5 to 10 years, I think we have more than we need because we have less cars. If suddenly the demand increases, Turkey exceeds 1 million, maybe we will have issues. But the problem is the capacity. So I know that the most popular charging station location today is Bolu, just between Ankara and Istanbul. And if all those charging stations are full, then they don't have enough capacity to give the electricity. So we have the charging stations, but we don't have the capacity. So problems may occur. It's still early, but I mean, EVs on its own cannot solve everything. So that's my view.
Perfect. We have 6 more minutes to go. There is still time for, yes, there is one short comment or question at the...
Firstly, thank you for the great presentation. I want to share my comments and ask a question about it. I think EVs are a great solution to avoid fuel dependency, but I think it should target middle and lower class in terms of income, because as much as I understand from this conversation, EVs are producing more carbon in the beginning phase, in the production phase, but if it is used in long terms, it has great benefits for the environment and the user in terms of economically as well. So, but it is great until this time, but our consuming habits are in short phases. We want to consume everything quickly. If we have a car, we want to change it maybe in 5 years. So it also increases if our welfare level is high. So I think EVs are great solution for the middle and lower class, but it's not a good solution for higher class because they have more tendency to consume everything more quickly. In Turkey, our car over ratio is lower than the other countries which welfare level is higher, so it must be great for our country. And I'd like to ask that this EV producing is targeting more middle class. It can be affordable for middle and lower class. What do you think about the class targeting about this EV thing?
Well, it's all about economics. I started with those because for EV manufacturers, they don't care if you're a low-income person or high-income. They wish to sell the car. So who is buying it, who is going to afford it, and who will pay for it? The early adopters are more often more wealthy, but it is a big discussion today if governments shall keep incentivizing these electric vehicles, because they do in many countries. And you know, in Turkey we don't have this incentive, and we talked about that with the ministry. And there is a unnamed reason for this incentive to be cancelled in Turkey. They call it a Cayenne incentive cancellation, because in Turkey, when they incentivized electric vehicles, majority of the incentives were going to buy Porsche Cayenne. And then the ministry said, you know, it was not our intention to incentivize people to buy Porsches, because with the incentive, it was much cheaper than a normal one. So then they canceled it, because the market was not ready for that incentive, and we still don't have it. But TOGG created a big impact on perception and also on the market. But again, it's not a low-income vehicle. So if the OEMs are doing it, OEMs are going, each one of those have announced that for every vehicle in the market will have an electric option. So all cars will have electric options. So there will be expensive model, there will be cheap models. And it is, I do not wish to split that, okay, EVs shall be only for the low-income people. I think it shall be a solution for everyone. We did not have enough solutions so far, but more and more cars will be coming. And as I mentioned, there will be vehicles which are named as cars. You know, in the very old days, maybe some of you may not remember, but we had a Fiat vehicle running, it was named as water. It was actually a battery, not like the accu. Can you remember the name of that vehicle? It was a very light Fiat running with a battery accu only. So in the past we also had these kind of options. It was not a real car, and we will also have many options in the market, like Citroën Ami. If you look at that car, it's very hard to call it a car. It's like a simple box running on an electric battery. And those kind of options will be more available, I think, if people keep buying those, because it's all about the demand. When we have enough demand, car manufacturers will start producing bicycles, if there's enough demand.
Okay, thank you. It's time to start wrapping up our conversation for today. I would like to thank both of our presenters here and the discussants, and especially our critical audience. It seems that there are still some questions to be thought about before seeing electric vehicles as the only solution for the future. But thank you for my part, and I hope you will enjoy the rest of the MARUF conference here.